The United States is the hegemon. It's going to be the hegemon for our lifetimes and our children and grandchildren's lifetimes. I'm absolutely convinced. But the Europeans can't just free ride. They need to step up. And I think economically and on defense, I think the Trump administration throws down a big challenge.
Boris Johnson has a unique relationship with Donald Trump.
You know what this is, as everybody knows? It's going to be a fantastic prime minister, I can tell you.
And while Johnson is no longer Prime Minister of the UK, he still holds strong views on just about everything.
Don't let Putin's pet parrots give this entire country psittacosis, which is a disease you get, by the way, from cozying up to pet parrots.
I sat down with Johnson at the Fortune Global Forum, where he weighed in on the impact of potential tariffs, the European economy, China's economic and military standing with the U.S., and what it all means for the future of the U.S. and Europe.
Boris, many of the CEOs who are with us here are finding that their relations with China are not quite as friendly as they had been. The president-elect is promising to put heavy tariffs on China. How do you think that the U.S. and the West generally should be reacting to China as an economic force?
So I think China is a great strategic competitor. It presents a huge challenge for everybody in the West. The rise of China is a huge fact of life. But I think my advice to everybody would be, don't freak out. And yeah, look, have been worried about China having too much of a role in nuclear power in the UK or in 5G, and we spend a lot of money getting them out. But on the other hand, I think that it'd be crazy for us to kind of turn our backs on a fifth of humanity with all the genius, all the talent, all the potential. China is integrally intertwined with the UK economy and with the US economy. Big companies, big US companies like Walmart get a huge proportion of their stuff from China. To try to deracinate, to try to uproot Chinese presence altogether in the US or the UK would be a tremendous destruction of value, and it would lift costs for ordinary people. I mean, be tough. China, they don't respect you unless you've got to be frank with the Chinese. So when it comes to issues like Xinjiang or Tibet or Hong Kong, where we have disagreements of principle about things, they're going to expect to hear that. And if they don't hear that, they're going to think you're a bit wet. Let's see what happens with the tariffs and all the rest of it that President Trump has threatened to impose. Tariffs, where they're not necessarily a very bad idea. They put up costs for both sides. They're crazy. They're economically illiterate. On the other hand, sometimes China dumps. And when China dumps, you've got to take anti-dumping measures.
China has become the primary adversary of the United States and vice versa. Each country's military is now gaming combat with the other one. Can the two countries maintain such a high level, such an enormous amount of trade, while also becoming more and more adversarial?
I hope that they do. And I hope that means that they don't become adversarial. I think that one of the ways to fix the problem of Chinese aggression, for instance, against Taiwan, is to make it very clear that the great democracies, led by the United States, won't stand for aggression. And the theater where that is most obvious is Ukraine. And I think there are clear read-acrosses between what's happening in Ukraine and other theaters, particularly the South China Sea. So, we can take the temperature down, everybody. Take the temperature down. Fix Ukraine. Get Putin out. Find a way forward there. And, I hope that President Trump can do that. But then I think that will take the temperature down with China as well.
Well, you have a lot of misinformation spread about China, and you have a lot of misinformation spread about other different places. I think I'm going to get along great with China. President Xi of China and I were very good friends.
And you had effectively endorsed him in your, or at least said, there's a good case to be made for him.
That's right. So
in your new book.
In my new book, Jeff, Unleashed, which you very generously alluded to. Look, I don't think it's the job of UK prime ministers or UK politicians to get involved in American domestic politics. I think it's not welcome in my experience. But I was just trying to make a few points about the Trump that I new, who is, I think, very different from the left-wing caricature when it comes to some of the areas of foreign policy that I had direct experience of. So when it was Iran or Syria or Ukraine, or even Ukraine, he was actually very robust. He was robust against Putin. And I think people sometimes, they forget that.
We can get Brexit done. We can move this country forward. I hope very much that you'll support us as a party of progress that will take this amazing country forward, unite it, and vote for a one-nation Conservative government on Thursday.
There continues to be debate, controversy in the UK about Brexit, many years now after it became reality. What's the argument in favor of sticking with it?
Well, there's a million arguments for sticking with it. The most important is that, I mean, actually, contrary to what you say, Jeff, it's people don't talk about it that much anymore. It's sort of it's down the political agenda. To imagine that Brexit will be reversed, you've got to imagine that the British people are going to vote to pay £20 billion to have their laws again decided elsewhere, their borders under the control of others, and give up the control of their currency. So it's not going to happen. The advantages of Brexit in a globalized economy are huge, and it just needs the government to exploit them. One of the things I point out in Unleashed is that it was very, very significant when we were dealing with COVID that we faced this appalling threat, and lots of people were dying. By March 2021, my government, had vaccinated 45% of the adults in the UK, almost 100% of those over 80. The corresponding figure in the EU was 10%, because they'd waited so long to get the approvals. And so in that sense, Brexit saved lives, and saved lives within months of it formally coming into effect. And, you won't read that in the New York Times. You won't read that in the left liberal media, but it is the truth.
Today, how would you compare the European economy with the U.S. economy?
The EU and the US were both worth about $14 trillion in 2008. Today, the EU is worth about $15 trillion, and the US is worth $26 trillion. And even though the US has far fewer people, right? So the growth rate in the US has been absolutely extraordinary, vertiginous. Compared to Europe, Europe is very sclerotic, very overburdened, far too much regulation. That's why Brexit offers such hope for the UK. Partly it's a function of legislation and regulation, but it's also to do with culture and aspiration and dynamism and guts and admiration for money. Because the people who appear in your pages, the people who appear on the front of your Fortune magazine in America, they're people who are held in esteem, right? In the UK, it's much more, I'm afraid, tragically, it's much more even-handed.
Under President Trump, the second time around, how do you expect relations to be between the United States and Europe and UK economically?
I think that they will continue to be extremely good. For my own country, for the UK, the US is by far our biggest individual national export market, our biggest trading partner. I think there are two ways in which the Trump agenda will be healthy for Europe. I hope that it will force an argument in our own societies about our economic model and the way it works, and the low growth, high tax, high spend cycle we've got ourselves into. And I hope the Trump agenda will challenge that. Second, I think the Trump administration's frankness and candor about the European need to spend more on defense will also be healthy. The world depends on the United States for its security. The United States is still 25% of global GDP. The United States is the hegemon. It's going to be the hegemon for our lifetimes and our children and grandchildren's lifetimes. I'm absolutely convinced. But the Europeans can't just free ride. They need to step up. And I think economically and on defense, I think the Trump administration throws down a big challenge to us to emulate the American approach.